All right, part 4 of graphing trigonometric functions. So number 13 has y equals 4 cosine of theta plus pi over 4. We start with the phase shift here. The phase shift comes from this green part. And so this is a left pi over 4. Left, obviously, you're going to go negative to, the starting point's going to be negative pi over 4. Period. Period comes from what's multiplied out here times theta. It's a 1 there. Now the period isn't 1. Remember, period is the normal period of cosine divided by whatever number that is, which if it's 1, it's obviously just 2 pi. I keep putting over 1. I don't really need to do that. For here, this is the amplitude. And then the vertical shift is 0 because nothing is added out here. Let's go ahead and put our horizontal axis. We're not going to put our y-axis in there yet because there is a phase shift. So let's talk about that phase shift. So the starting point of our cycle that we're referring to is negative pi over 4. And we're going to add the period to get our ending point. So we are going to take the negative pi over 4, and we're going to add the period of 2 pi to get our ending point, and you can do the math there. You will get 1 3/4. So we're going to put our starting point is negative pi over 4 here. We'll put an ending point here, which is 1 3/4 pi. As I mentioned in the last video, you also can think of, well, hold on a second. We'll put our 4 spots here. And in the last video, I gave you a couple different options. I've used the 1 pretty often, but this one, let's just mention this again. We know our period is 2 pi. So from start to finish is 2 pi. If we divide that into fourths, we know that each one of these, so you take your 2 pi divided by 4 is 2 pi over 4, which does reduce to 1/2 pi. But for this, since the denominator is already in fourths, we can just say negative pi over 4, or negative 1 pi over 4 plus 2 pi over 4. So negative 1 plus 2 is 1 pi over 4, plus another. So this is the distance between each mark on there. So marks are these things. So I'm going to add 2 pi over 4. So 1 pi over 4 plus 2 pi over 4 is 3 pi over 4. Plus another 2 pi over 4 is 5 pi over 4. Plus another 2 pi over 4 is 7 pi over 4, which is the same as that 1 3/4. So that's another way to get what those lengths are. That's probably where people get tripped up a bit, is on finding those values. But back to what we're doing here. We can put our y-axis in there now because we have negative pi over 4 and pi over 4, so halfway between there is 0. So that is our y-axis there. So you can put the y-axis halfway in between there. That is not one of our places where we're going to put a point, though, so be careful of that. So our amplitude is 4, so we can go up to 4 and down to negative 4. You can put all of the values in there if you want to. Negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4. Put some guidelines in there if you want. You don't have to, but sometimes they're helpful. And boy, my writing's going to be right in my graph. This is a cosine graph, so cosine starts up at its starting point. Now remember this is our starting spot, this green one, so we're going to start up at 4. The y-axis was not one of our spots, so down to 0, down to -1, back up to 0, back up to 1. We can put another point here if we want, another couple. And so we'll even go backwards a couple. So here's our graph. All right, number 14. This 4, again, has to do with our amplitude. -11 pi over 6. Oops, that should be in green, right? So -11 pi over 6. Our phase shift is going to be right. 11 pi over 6. Because that's what's added or subtracted to theta. Period. Our period is 2 pi, because that's just a coefficient of 1. Amplitude is the red 4 there. And vertical shift to 0. We can go ahead and draw our horizontal axis. I'm not going to draw the y-axis in there because it's this graph is shifted. And so our starting point is 11 pi over 6, almost 2 pi, because 2 pi is 12 pi over 6. And then we are going to add 2 pi to get the end point. So you should be able to add fractions by now. 11 pi over 6 plus 2 pi. Get a common denominator. And so that's 11 pi over 6 plus 12 pi over 6 is 23 pi over 6. And that will be the end point. So we can put our starting point at 11 pi over 6. Our end point at 23 pi over 6. And we can split that into 4 equal parts. Now, I will label those, but don't always get too hung up on this. You can go ahead and graph if you want to. Now, I'm not putting a y-axis here, so we're just going to kind of have to, I guess I've been putting a dotted line here kind of to help us, but again, we do want to be able to find what these marks are on our horizontal axis, but you still can graph without writing those numbers on there because we know we're dealing with cosine. Cosine starts up, so we can think, okay, we're going to start up here. I know this isn't our y-axis, but I'll go ahead and mark this 4, and down here is -4. And that's because, so we usually did those in red because that has to do with our amplitude here. And so cosine starts up, then goes down to 0, then goes down to the lowest, which in this case is -4, back up to 0, and back up to the highest, which is 4. And we can continue that. And we can graph this function. And we don't have a lot of our points labeled. So there's the graph, but you do need to find those. So let's go ahead and find these, well, that's split into fourths. So as mentioned before, we're taking the period of 2 pi. So it is 2 pi from start to finish, because that's the period. If we take 2 pi and divide it into 4 equal parts, that's 2 pi over 4. So from here to here is 2 pi over 4. 2 pi over 4, 2 pi over 4, 2 pi over 4. Well, we're dealing with sixths here, so I don't want to add 2 pi over 4. I can reduce this. This is pi over 2. I don't even want to deal with pi over 2. I need a common denominator, so I can multiply. I want to get a denominator of 6, so I can multiply by 3 over 3. So each one of these spaces, we're going to add 3 pi over 6. So 11 plus 3 is 14 pi over 6. 14 plus 3 is 17 pi over 6. 17 plus 3 is 20 pi over 6, and this is a good check for us. If 20 plus 3 is the 23 pi over 6. Now these two can be reduced by 2, so this is 7 pi over 4. And this is 10 pi over 4. But we are able to find those, and we can go backwards 3 pi over 6. So subtract 11 pi over 6 minus 3. 11 minus 3 is 8 pi over 6. Minus 3 is 5 pi over 6. Minus 3 is 2 pi over 6. Here was our next spot. Minus 3 is negative 1. Oops, sorry about that. Negative 1 pi over 6. Well, there's negative 1 and 2, so what's between there? The y-axis. So the y-axis is here. Pretty great stuff. All right.